eventually many of us will have evolved, or most of us will have, so that it becomes a planet of regeneration. And then on down the road, we don't know how long, but eventually he intends for this to be a planet of perfect spirits. Thank you, Daniel. Okay. Let's review here. And I wanted to encourage you. The title of the chapter is Many Are Called, but Few Are Chosen. And the subject we're talking about in item 5 is the narrow gate. And there's so much more information available to you in the gospel itself. So I would encourage you to use this chapter for home study and to concentrate on those scriptures in items 3 and 4, and then the spirit teachings in item 5, which we're going to talk about some more. So, we just briefly let me outline our objectives. We've already actually gone over the meaning of the narrow door and the wide door. And we have pretty much identified, of course, that the narrow door is the one that we want to choose and is the path that will lead us all to God. And we read our scripture, so we won't go through all that again. But this is, as I said, available to you in your gospel. And this part is where he talked to them about how they would stand outside the door but would not be accepted in because they had not evolved. I don't know who you are or where you come from. Away from me, all you evildoers. And then we talked about the first will be last and the last will be first. And these concepts I didn't go over. We should remember these precepts when thinking about that. The first will be last and the last will be first. There's no heavenly law wherein the poor are automatically going to become powerful over the rich in heaven. That is not the way it works. It depends upon each person's spiritual development. The rich aren't always going to be last in heaven, and the poor won't always be first. Nor will believers who enjoy wealth and privilege on earth be required to be abased or lowered in heaven. Being rich doesn't automatically make you an evildoer, does it? No. And being poor doesn't automatically make you a good person. So we have examples of both. And I did talk to you about how these two examples would represent how the first will be last and the last will be first. A rich person could be last, but on earth would be considered first because of wealth and power, and the reverse for the poor person. That is how the poor person can be first in heaven, yet considered lowly on earth because he has developed the virtues that God would like to see us develop. And we've read almost all of item 5. The analogy of the wide door and the narrow door complements the maxim, many are called, but few are chosen. And who's really doing the choosing? Is God choosing who goes through that door? No, we are choosing, aren't we? We each choose whether we want to follow that path, whether we have the resignation, the strength, the courage to focus on our spiritual and development and evolution. And we just read this part about how when the planet does evolve to a certain stage, it will become a planet of regeneration. And God did not intend for us to stay a planet of trials and expiations, of course. He has always intended Earth to be a place of development and evolution. And it's up to us, with God's help and the teachings of Jesus, to be able to finally commit ourselves to making it through that narrow door. When the pre-existence of the soul and the plurality of worlds with the preexistence of the soul. The horizons spread out. Enlightenment comes to even the most obscure points of faith. The present and the future become linked to the past, and it is then that it is possible to understand the depth, truth, and wisdom of the words spoken by Christ. All right, and then just as a little review here, the narrow door symbolizes the difficult journey of the spirit in search of enlightenment and spiritual evolution. And the wide door represents the easy route taken by the errant spirit who walks with evil and in darkness. I do want to share this with you, this quote from Emmanuel. And for those who may not know, Emmanuel is a guardian spirit and was the spirit guide of Chico Xavier, who is a very distinctive person in the Spiritist doctrine. And this is from his Spirit of Truth, message 14. The narrow door reveals the spiritual arrangement that allows us to march on the evolutionary path in a timely manner. The wide door expresses the imbalance with which forces within us, which forces us to go through the pain and reparation and the lamentable loss of time. So what he's trying to say, Emmanuel, and very smartly so, is that if we do choose the wide path and the wide door, this is a choice that we are allowed to make. However, we need to remember that if we do choose during this particular reincarnation or any reincarnation to take the easy route, then it's going to add to our time of evolution. It'll be harder for us. It'll be a longer time before we become as close to God as we would like. So Emmanuel encourages us not to add to our trials and our things that we have to atone for, and he doesn't want us to waste our time in any incarnation, but to continue to work and evolve. And of course, we talked about whether this is going to be a privilege that God gives to only a few. And we decided no, that it is not. It's available to everybody. And why? Because progress is one of God's laws. So, and God just didn't make that up. Just, you know, he didn't think to himself, okay, that's a pretty good thing. Let's do that. No, he makes the divine laws because he expects us to follow them. And if we don't, then he gives us opportunities throughout each incarnation to evolve and to begin to follow those divine laws. In the divine dictionary, there is no such term as privilege. God sees us all equally as his children, and he wants us to be successful as his children. Successful meaning spiritually and morally. He wants us to be good and kind to others. So this is what he wants for us, and he will help us in every way that we ask for help in. So the wide door is an entry into an illusion and the rejection of efforts toward reform. What does he mean by an illusion? What do you think that means? Here's my take. Exactly. We tend to get sidetracked searching for material things, don't we? We see the glittering riches, the money, the fame, and the power, and we want that, but ultimately those are not the important things. So that's what he's talking about when he says illusions. And the narrow door equals a rejection of wrongdoing and entry into a renewal of the spirit. So if people know that they should walk this narrow path, why do they prefer to go down the wide road? Well, it's not exactly a preference. It's more of a disposition. And as Eduardo will talk about a couple of weeks from now, when he talks about our personalities, we have tendencies, okay? We have predispositions to think a certain way sometimes. And those who wander the paths of error, in view of the evolutionary stage we're at right now, humanity is today on Earth, it's not a preference, but more of a predisposition toward taking the easy road. It's a choice. With the influx of the law of progress, man will sooner or later yield to the need to evolve and will take the path that leads to the narrow door. Notice it says sooner or later, man will yield to the need to progress. And here's what we believe in the Spirit's doctrine, is that with each incarnation, we can either stay static and stationary, or we do progress and evolve. Never do we go backward, though. So we always keep what we've gained during the previous incarnations, and we are given yet another opportunity to go even further. Some of us will choose the easy way, and we'll just kind of stay on the same path that we've been doing. But eventually, we will all need to change, and we'll realize the need for that change. So given that the wide door is a great mass of illusions, as we talked about, does this mean that it is an insurmountable obstacle? Has God put this in our way to keep us from progressing? Absolutely not. It's available to anybody. It is a difficult obstacle, no doubt about that. But nothing and no one can hold back the progress of people who want to take on the challenge, since this is in accordance with the divine plan, or the law of progress, the law of evolution. Progress is embedded in divine law, and there is nothing that prevents it from implanting itself in the earth. So our next question says, what happens to those who reject that path to the narrow door? What happens to the ones that go through the wide door? Are they punished? Well, let's see what our gospel says about that. If we reject the fraternal invitation of the gospel to the narrow door, our conduct will lead us to an extended period of time and additional pain before we reach God according to the rule of divine mercy. And that was exactly what Emmanuel said, wasn't it? That it's going to add to our time of trials and expiations and reparations and atonement. So if we would like to move more quickly in our evolution, then we have to resign ourselves and accept that we need to create a path of goodness in our lives so that we can evolve. No sheep will be lost in the Lord's flock, and one day we will all be part of the sublime universal family. That's a very, very comforting thought to me. It is, because it lets me know that God has faith in me, that I am one day going to become a part of his kingdom, a part of his family. And as I said before, he does consider us all his children. So he is on our side and there to help us when we need it. So, is the door to salvation always going to be narrow? I think in a sense it will be, because there is a certain path that we're going to need to walk to reach it. And we're going to need to walk a narrow path where we have self-control and a willingness and an earnestness to evolve spiritually. However, the gospel says that it won't always be narrow. As we increase the number of people who walk the path of goodness, it will become less arduous, and it will extend to all those who propose to reach it. So eventually, when enough people begin to take this path, it will have to widen. The door will have to widen. And this, of course, is just it's a metaphor, and it's an example. But it kind of does help us understand the difference between taking the easy path and the narrow path. But eventually, as Earth moves toward regeneration, the narrow door will become wider. As man evolves, he becomes more aware of the need to practice goodwill, making it less difficult for him to follow that path. And when you think about it, that makes a whole lot of sense. If we are forcing ourselves to do something we don't want to do, that we really don't have our hearts in, then it's just going to be harder and harder. But if we pray and we resign ourselves and accept that this is what we need to do, then that's going to make us want to do it. That's going to make us want to move more quickly. And we're going to say to ourselves, hey, what can I do today to make sure that I add to my spiritual involvement? And it's going to become not an obstacle for us, but more of a challenge. And it won't be as hard for us to do. And we talked a little bit about the Earth being a planet of regeneration. And the Spiritist doctrine reveals that by the blessing of reincarnation, people can improve themselves and work toward improving the current state of humanity on Earth. And as we improve humanity on Earth, then eventually those who are still not progressing and have more evil than good will be going to a different place so that Earth can continue its march toward being a pure planet. The day will come when the Earth will be a place only for those who take the path of the narrow door. So, in conclusion, the narrow door is the only path that will lead us all to God. And to reiterate the words of Emmanuel, if we reject the fraternal invitation to the narrow door, our conduct will lead us to an extended period of time and additional pain before we reach God, according to the rule of divine mercy. God doesn't want to make it hard on us. He wants to make it so that we become people of goodness and virtue. He wants us to be charitable. He wants us to be loving and kind toward our neighbors, all of our neighbors, and even our enemies. And he wants us to develop these virtues that will eventually, if enough of us do so, will cause the planet Earth and humanity itself to evolve into a higher state of spiritual evolution and be closer to God, which is, of course, our goal. Do y'all have anything to add or any questions that I could answer for you? I want to invite you all to be sure and come on the 14th when Eduardo gives his presentation, because he's going to be talking about a lot of things that tie in with this lesson as well, and how our personalities can affect the way we choose to go through the narrow door or the wide door. So it's going to be really interesting. So I hope you'll be able to come that night. And Daniel, thank you for setting up the presentation for us. We appreciate it. And thank you all once again for allowing me to present the lecture for you tonight. I really enjoyed doing it. And I hope you'll take away something that will cause you to ponder and think and maybe have learned a little bit from what we've talked about tonight. Thank you so much.